Hello, welcome back to the woods, and welcome back to the next part of our bushcraft for beginners series. That's right, in the last video we looked at your choice of tools, and in this video what we're going to look at is, well, how to use them safely. That's right, because any good bushcraft course always starts with how to use your tools safely to keep you safe while you're out here in the woods. We're also going to look a little bit at how to maintain your knife while you are out in the woods. And the tools and maintenance we're going to look at in this video is going to be for both fixed blades and for folding blades too. And of course we're going to be showing you how to do it well in standard British bushcraft weather. If you're new to the channel and you're enjoying this video, then remember to subscribe to the channel and to like the video. Now on with the main feature. Now, we've all heard that saying that a sharp tool is a safe tool, and in some ways a lot of people think that's a little bit contradictory, but it's not at all. A sharp tool is a safer tool because, well, you require less effort and less pressure to use that knife. So while you are cutting away, you're not having to push quite so hard. So you've got more control of it, and if you've got more control of it, then it's less likely that you're going to slip and cut yourself. So that's why we use sharp tools. That's not to say that just because they're sharp you're not going to cut yourself. You should always still carry your cuts kit because it can happen to the best of us, but it's less likely to happen if your tools are kept sharp. And for that reason, well, there's a few bits and pieces that we normally carry with us to help keep our tools nice and sharp. So to help maintain my tools in the field, I carry a very elaborate sharpening system that's super expensive. Come on, you know me better than that. Actually, what I tend to carry when I'm in the field are some very simple things. One of these, this is a sharpening board, and all it is a piece of pine board with some double-sided tape on it and some emery cloth on it. And I've got loads of these, and the more you use them, the shinier they get, and so you can keep them for going down the grades. So I usually got one of those in my pack. Not as effective as a Japanese waterstone, but if you're just learning, something like this is a lot cheaper. If you think your Japanese sharpening stone, yeah, one of these, it doesn't really matter. These are very effective, very cheap, and they work very well. Also, I've got this little thing which I carry in my pocket, which is, again, it's something very similar. This is like a very fine plastic emery cloth. On the other side there is a piece of leather, and they're both laminated to a piece of circuit board. What I also carry, that's right, a good old leather belt, straight out of a charity shop. And this, well, you'll see what that's for in a moment. So when sharpening, what we actually want is something that is that proper steep angle. No secondary bevel, and it should be a straight, perfectly straight edge, not rounded at all, a perfectly straight edge. That way it's going to slice better into the wood. Now I get asked quite a lot, and a few people have made comments in the comments box, why do we go for Scandi grind? Well, the Scandi grind, if you look, it's completely flat. There's no secondary bevel on it, okay? And that is ideal for working with wood, and in bushcraft that tends to be what we want. It's not a multi-purpose blade as such, it's something that predominantly is going to be working wood, so we want that completely flat edge on each side. Now to do that, what we're doing is we're laying this on the board and we're working it across the top, holding it to completely flat. Now if you look, you can just see the back edge of the blade is up, but the bevel is completely flat on the board, and we do that along the top like so. And obviously we then flip it, and then it comes back the other way, so we're maintaining both sides. And that we tend to do to get it initially sharp at home on a workbench. Out here in the field, where it's a little bit more difficult, we tend to use one of these on a flattish surface. I'm actually going to use the tree that I'm sat on. So laying that on there, keeping the pressure on that forward edge, and run it along. Turn it and then do the same, coming back the other way. So we run our blade over the sharpening stone to get that perfect edge. The problem is, if you looked at that under a microscope, it's not actually that perfect. You'll see there's like a little burr that sits over the top. Microscopic. Now what we want to do is remove that. And the way we do that, well, is using one of these. This is a strop. If you've been to an old-fashioned barber's, you'll see them on the wall. Not a belt, but they have an actual piece of leather, and the barber, once he's trimmed your hair and he comes to shave that bit down your neck or shave down where your sideburns are, he then holds that strap and he gets his cutthroat razor and he up on the wall. Similarly, if you go to a butcher's and you ask for a cut of meat, and the old-fashioned butcher, what he would then do is he'd go and get his knife, get the piece of meat, put the meat on the board, and then just before he cuts it, he would take his steel and he'd go and all they're doing is removing any burrs on the edge, just putting it, making it that little bit sharper, ready for when they're using it. Now, in the field, we're just going to use this belt, and you can see I've wrapped it around this tree. And what I'm going to do is pull this nice and tight, put my body weight on there, and my blade, well, what I'm going to do is we never cut forward onto it, because that would slice into it. Instead, what we're going to do is lay the bevel flat on the belt, and then we're just going to move it across like so. I'm then going to carefully lift it off and turn it, and then bring it back the other way like so. Now some people, they'll put a polishing compound on here, but this one's just normal, and I find it's enough. So with a folding knife, well, the principle's the same. The only difference is they tend to have a secondary bevel, and you can just see that there. So this is a flat grind, but then it just curls over slightly at the top. So with this, well, it's slightly less precise, but you're still going to work the blade. You've just got to estimate where that bevel is. Now there are gadgets out there. There's a gadget called the Wedge, which is very, very good. I did a review on one a while ago, and I'll put a link for it in the description box down below. But essentially, we just keep working it over the top. I'm still trying to polish that edge. To get it as sharp as possible. And then once I've done that, well, then what I'm going to do is go back to my strop again, just to polish that edge up. Now I always leave my strop on a tree fairly close to where I am, so that as I'm working away, if perhaps that edge starts to get a little bit dull, well, I can just go over and I can quickly give it a few strops, and that just brings that edge back up again. And it's better to do that regularly, because it makes your life that little bit easier and that little bit safer. Now, talking about safety, you've also got to think about where we are carving. Ideally, you want somewhere where there's no distractions, so you can concentrate on the work, where you're relatively comfortable. Well, if you're out in the woods, that should be the case. If you're working around other people, then you also need to think about not only your safety, but also their safety. Ideally, if there's more than one of you, there should be a distance between you, that if you put your arms out like so, you shouldn't be able to touch anybody. And the reason for that is, well, while we're carving, we tend to sort of focus on what's happening here, right in front of us. What we don't think about is what happens at the end of the cut. So if we're doing cuts like so, we've got to think about, well, what's happening over here. If someone is sat in that area as I'm cutting, then that could put them in danger. So make sure you've got a reasonable amount of space around you. If you can put your hands out like that and touch somebody, you're too close, so move. Now the next thing we need to think about is, well, our own safety. We need to think a bit about our body positioning. Now the big bit we're always worried about is what I call the danger triangle, and it's from here down around those bits down to our knees and across through there, because running down the inside of your thighs you've got your femoral artery, and we don't want to cut into one of those. So the general rule of thumb is, yes, we always cut away from ourselves, but also we make sure that we're not cutting into that area. Now I call it the danger triangle, some people call it the blood bubble. There's all sorts of different terms to it. Let's not get too caught up in that. Just don't cut in this area. Instead, what I tend to do is, well, I tend to carve side saddle. So I'm left-handed, so I carve over on my left-hand side. Not everyone can do that. Some people aren't that comfortable. So what they could do is, while they're cutting, if you make sure they put their elbows onto their knees, what that does is that takes the blade away from this area. As long as their elbows are in contact with their knees, it removes the blade from that danger area. As I said, most of the time I'm quite happy, well, to carve side saddle on my left hand side. Obviously if you're right-handed, well, you'd be working over on the other side. My supporting hand, my right hand, is across my body, so it's also, if I'm working on longer pieces of wood, it gives me a brace, an extra bit of strength. But also, as I said, my left hand is over here working, and there's nothing in this area here that I can cut. Now what we're going to look at is the different cuts, just common cuts that we do in bushcraft. We're going to make something called a tri-stick. It's a well-known thing in the world of bushcraft, and we get to try all of those different cuts, and I'm going to run through a few of them with you. Now the piece of wood that I've got, as you can see, it's a piece of green wood. It was cut yesterday, and it's a piece of willow. It's got a nice soft wood to work with. Lengthwise, well, it's sort of from the armpit out to my fingertip. It can be shorter, it could be longer, but I find this is quite a reasonable size for moving around while I am cutting. Plus it gives me enough space to put in the various cuts that I would like. Now you'll also notice this one has no side branches, but you may not be able to get one that's got no side branches. So here's another one, and this one has got the side branches. Now what you'll notice with these, and this is a little piece of sycamore, is that the branches tend to go upwards in the direction that the tree has grown. Now if you've got to trim these off, well, there's a right and a wrong way to do it. So when we cut, we never cut that way, against the direction. I'll show you why. So that's cutting with the direction. What I'm going to do is cut from the other side. Now this is quite a sharp knife, and you can see I'm already having to put a lot of pressure on it. You can see I'm cutting away, but it really is really quite tough. Now let's turn it round and let's cut in the way that the tree has grown. So I've turned it round, the branch is facing up that way, and we're just going to slice this off. Again, I'm making sure I'm cutting away from myself, okay? Just like that. There's a bit of a bump there, but that's okay, because it's easy to trim that off. Job done. Always cut in the direction that the tree grows. So as I said, the tri-stick, well, it tends to include commonly used cuts. So the first one that we're going to do is, well, it tends to be ones that we use on things that we're going to hit the end of. And what I want to do is chamfer the end of it. So I'm going to round the top off. Now the reason being, if we just use a flat stick like so, and then I use a batten and I'm hammering the top of it to hammer it in the ground, you're never hitting completely flat on the top. You tend to be striking the edges, and as soon as you strike the edges, well, those edges start to split, and the split goes all the way down. By chamfering it, rounding it off, turning it into a dome, it helps to stop the split from sticking. Yeah, if you really whack the hell out of it, it's gonna split, but you're minimising the chances by rounding off the top of it off. So anything where you've got to drive a stake into the ground, could be for a pot hanger, or it could be for a tent peg, round the top off. Now to do that, it's very, very simple. What we do is using our knife, okay, and holding it with our supporting hand, what I'm then going to do is just trim the top off. Now I don't trim from too far back, I only want to take little bits off, but what you'll notice is it's this thumb is actually doing all the work. And all we do is just cut, and as we cut, we turn the wood as well. Very, very simple, like so. And we just keep going round until we've gone all the way around the top. Now we can repeat the process to increase the height of the dome. And there it is, done, rounded off. Now our next little cut, what we're going to do on this one is we are going to cut a little band all the way around there. And these little notches that you're going to cut in that go all the way around, they can be used in several ways. If you want to put a loop of cord on there that you don't want to come off, then it can sit in that little groove that you're going to create. If perhaps you haven't got a saw with you and you're working on a piece of wood like this that's sort of, I don't know, a good thumb and a bit thick, then if you go round several times, you get it to a point where actually you can snap it, because you've cut that band all the way around that's weakened the structure of it. So that's going to be our next cut. Now to start this one off, what we're going to do is work on our log, and we're going to push down with our knife blade to cut that ring that goes all the way around, and then using pretty much the same dimensions, technique even, I'm going to cut up to that line. So there you go, that goes all the way around. Now what I could do is obviously I could also come in from this direction as well, just to go around, but because I'm working quite close to the end of the stick, I don't really want to do that. So we'll move on to our next cut, and our next cut, well, we're going to put in a figure 7, and it's a notch that you use for pot hangers, tent pegs, all sorts of things. Now I'm going to cut a stop cut in there like so. And to do that, I'm just going to batten it down. Once I've battened it, I'm then going to cut upwards towards that line. And there you go, and you can see that's a pretty good little cut. That's going to prevent your guy lines coming off if you're using that as a tent peg, or if you're using it as a trap trigger, or again if you're using it as part of your cooking system. So it's a figure 7 notch, it's a nice easy one to cut. So our next one that we're going to cut is a bird's beak cut, and these ones very useful for pot hangers. On my journeyman staff, it's one that I use a lot, and what it gives us is something like our figure 7, but instead of a flat edge, it gives us a point that we can work to. Now to do that, again, I'm going to use the batten, and I'm going to put a cross, and that cross, where the apex of the cross is what I'm going to cut against. So there you go, that's our bird's beak. For our next one, I'm going to make a circular depression in the top, which is useful if you're making frames, etc., where you need to lock one piece of wood against the other. To do it, very, very simple. All I'm going to do is cut in, like so. So I've cut into that. And I'm going to do that a couple of times. Just cutting in. Then I'll turn the piece of wood round, cut against those cuts again. And it's a little cut, and it's got that scooping motion. Now with that one, there is an extended version we can do of that, where you can make it slightly longer. And then, as well as doing it on one side, you can also do it on the other side. So here's one that I've done before, and you can see there's that little saddle cut. But down here, I've got a saddle cut, but you can see I've done it on both sides. And then what I've done is I've made a little hole in there. Now, on here there's lots and lots of different cuts. And you can see we've rounded off the top. We've done our figure 7 notch, we've done our little cut round, we've done our bird's beak, saddle notch, another one of those little ones that cuts all the way around. We've done this one as well, and that one, well, that's a figure 7 cut, but you're cutting from both sides. And then the one below that, well, this one reminds me of a cotton reel. And really that is just the same as this one. It's the same principle. We mark all the way around like we did on this one, and then using the point of our knife we shave up that way, and then you do another one that way, but again we flip the wood over and we cut up towards it. This one, well, it's the same, but this one is a square one, a box one. And these are all different notches and things that we use in bushcraft. At the end there I've got a chisel point. And you'll notice with all of these, as we were cutting, we cut away from ourselves the whole time. And that's the big rule. There's a couple of other cuts that we can do where we are cutting in a different way. But the main thing is, think about your body position, where the blade is in relation to you. And we're always cutting away. Have a safe space. Think about that danger triangle. And you won't go far wrong. Now, so far, we've only used our fixed blade knife, and I did say at the beginning of the video that we'd also look at how we can use our folding knife again to keep it safe. And as we said in the other video, the chances are it's going to be your folding knife that you're going to use most of the time. So our big consideration with our folding knife, yeah, they're very convenient, they fit in our pockets. But the reason they get such a bad name in bushcraft is because, well, they fold. And for that reason, they're not as strong as a fixed blade. And also for that reason, they require a little bit more care when using them because of that fold. And there is always that chance that it could fold onto our hand. So we need to be that little bit more careful. Now, several things. When cutting with a folding knife, where again we're always cutting away, we don't ever do pushing down, which we can with our fixed blade knife because it's not going to fold on us. But as soon as we start pushing down on this, well, there is a chance that that could happen and it could fold up on us. So we need to be that little bit more careful. So we think through any cutting that we're going to do to make sure that we're not putting it under undue stress. Now, the other thing with these is they say we can't use them for battening because of that weak spot there, that hinge. But there is a way around it, and I'm going to show it to you. Now, for that, we're going to make a little project, just something really quick. All you're going to need is a little green stick, and you're also going to need a batten, and you're also going to need a candle. If you could hear banging and crashing in the background, it's Hazel, and she's done up like the Green Michelin Man. She's brought all her own stuff out in her bag. She's got her waterproof layers, her warm layers, etc., and she's learning how to use them out in the woods. And she's picked an amazing day to do it. Right, go that way because I need to get on there. Right, let's get this done. So I've got my folding knife, and the first thing that I want to do is, well, I'm going to do a long shaving cut. I want to take a couple of bits of the bark off this. Now this particular cut, well, it's very similar to what you're going to use if you ever do feather sticks. So all I'm going to do is hold it at one end with my supporting hand, and then I'm going to pick an area where there's not too many little buds sticking out the side, and I'm going to cut a shallow cut away from myself. Okay, now as you can see, I'm cutting sides so they're all working off to the side. So here I go, and I just want a fairly long, fairly consistent cut like so, and I want 2 of those. So I've got me 2. Now, little word from the wise: when you're working greenwood, particularly if you're working with kids, they love shaving the bark off stuff. Don't let them do it. Try to keep as much of the bark intact as possible, because as soon as you take the bark off in greenwood, the water comes to the surface and you end up with this sort of slimy surface, and that's difficult to grip, and so as they're cutting, it's sliding around in their hand. So just a little top tip. So on with the project. So I've shaved that off. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to round off the top of one end, exactly the same as we did on the tri-stick. So I'm going to go for this end, and I'm just going to do that little cut, pushing with this thumb and turning the wood as I go. Like that. Next thing I want to do, well, I'm going to put one of those little figure 7 cuts. I'm not going to use the batten this time, I'm just going to push down. And this is one of the things you have to think of with a folding knife. You're not always going to be able to use that batten because we don't want to put that hinge under pressure. So I'm just going to cut up to that. You can still achieve the same, but you're just doing it in smaller bits. There we go. And all I do is then repeat. Like so. Now with that done, well, what I want to do next is something you shouldn't really do with a folding knife. What I'm going to do is I'm going to batten through the end of this stick using my folding knife, and I'm going to show you a way that you can do it. So what I want to do is I want to put a split down through this stick, probably down to about where my finger is, and I want it to run through that front of that figure 7 notch, and I'm going to use my folding knife to do it. However, I'm also going to use a batten, but what I'm not going to do is just place it on the top and then use my stick to batten. Something else I'm going to do instead. I'm going to fold the knife so it's an L shape. I'm then going to place that on the top, and then, and as you can see, I'm not putting that hinge under any pressure at all. What I'm going to do, maintain the pressure on this side, gently tap down on the other side, like so. And there you can see I've split all the way down through. So I'm carefully going to remove that. Quickly fold that one over. And then the next thing I'm going to do, and the last thing, is I just want to put a quick point onto the end of this stick. So top split, figure 7 notch. Let's just quickly put a point on this again, holding it across my body, supporting hand, holding it nice and firm. A little note with supporting hand. What I see people do quite often, if I'm working with kids, these fingers got a nasty habit of creeping forward. Don't let them. right, make sure they're tucked back, because if they creep forward and you're slicing down, there's a chance you could slice that finger. So fingers tucked back, knife in a good fist grip, and I'm just going to cut, again cutting away from myself, cutting downwards towards the ground. And these are quite strong cuts because I want it to be a nice steep point. And I'm just going to quickly fold this, put that one away, because I don't really need it now. Tuck that out of the way in there. Now the reason we want a nice stout point as opposed to a long pointy point is long pointy points got a nasty habit of breaking when you bang them into the ground. A nice short stout point like that one, well, that one's not going to. Now we are nearly there. Right, so for the last little bit of this little project, all we're going to do is take our stick with the split in the top. We're going to take these two, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold these to form a loop, and then that loop, what I'm going to do is force it into that split in the end, just by pinching it together like so. And I'm going to do the same with the other one. And then I'm just going to slide those down a little bit, like so. Then all we're then going to do is just take our candle and then pull onto the bark like so. And it just gives us that little bit of tension on there. And there we go, our little bushcraft candle holder, and all made with a folding knife, because that's probably going to be the one that you have on you. All this is a very simple little safe cutting exercise that you can do with kids, like Hazel or your grandkids, whoever, or just for you. If you've never done anything like this before and you want a simple project that you can do while you're out in the woods, this is a cracking little one to get you started. So there you go, that is a basic guide to safe cutting. It's not the only safe cutting skills, and I'm sure there will be lots of people who know way better than I do, but those are the basic safe cutting skills that I teach, and they've kept lots of people safe for a very long time. As we go through the course, you will be introduced to other cutting techniques as well, but for now those are ones that are there to get you started. Plus there's a little project in there to boot as well. So get out in the woods, give it a go, and keep yourself safe. So there you go. If you enjoyed this video and you found it useful, please hit that thumbs up button, and if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the channel. A massive thank you to all those people who have been subscribing just recently. It's a massive help, and I thank you very much. What you can also do is tell your friends about it. Share it on your social medias. Anything that you find useful, get out there, share it. Just see if we can get this out there to people. I will put a link in the description box down below for the wedge, that little sharpening thing, and start getting yourself a few bits and pieces together for sharpening, because it is essential to have sharp tools while you are out in the woods. Also in that description box down below there is a link over there to the Greencraft Shop. Over there from time to time there is various bits and pieces. There are always my Greencraft patches. I think the last lot of survival scarves has just gone. I am about to cut a whole load more of the EDC Lite patches as well, so keep your eye on the shop. I think that's everything. I've been Neil, and until next time, stay safe in the woods.